to work with BoardRoom Institute. So talking a little bit about COVID, and I know everybody is very, very tired of talking about COVID and hearing the numbers every night, and I've stopped listening to the news. It's just depressing. But before COVID, city clubs were averaging, your membership was spending about $2,500 to $2,700 in dues. Memberships were spending $2,500 to $2,700 in food and beverage. That's just a flat average. So many of you are $17 to $30 million organizations. Some of you are $4 or $5 million organizations. So it's hard to get a baseline, but that is the baseline I pulled, which didn't really leave a lot to go towards capital expenses. And I can't imagine how last year was for many of you. I know city clubs have had to use savings, capital. I know they've had to sell art here in the States, or sell or lease space. Now, Peter, you were just saying that one of your clubs has declared bankruptcy.
Yeah, Bankers Hall in Calgary announced last night that they're recently filing for Chapter 11, and I'm not sure how they'll come out of that, given the rent that they'll owe for that space and not having had charged dues for nearly a year.
That is so sad to see, and very, very difficult to stand by and watch. Not only are clubs having a hard time, but now in the cities, we're seeing a huge uptick of homeless or indigent people and crime, drugs, petty theft, car thefts, people, and including probably some of employees that work downtown that were just trying to make it from paycheck to paycheck are now homeless. And now, employees know who have the money, and they're going to try to do the best they can to continue to survive. And thinking of that, one of the crimes that I wanted to discuss that is on a huge uptick right now is cybercrime. And I really didn't think about it, but as an individual, if I knew more about computers, that is what I would do if I was a criminal. Your clubs have the who's who of the city, of your nation, and if they can get into your computer system, if you take credit cards or have bank routing numbers on your system, cybercrime is a huge deal. And I can talk about it personally because my club here in my town, I was visiting last February, and I was talking to the GM and said, "How's it going?" And he looked down and he said, not real good. And I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, last week I got this email that someone was holding our system hostage, and they used Jonas." And I said, "Well, when I worked here 8 years ago, we backed up every day. It was, we didn't have the cloud yet. So we mailed ourselves a copy of our Jonas system every day. At the end of the day, we just drop it in the mail. If there's a fire or anything, it was on its way back." So I said, "So when's the last time you backed up? Do you still mail yourself this copy?" And he said, "No." And he looked down and I said, "So when's the last time you backed up?" And he said, "When you were here." And so 8 years of documentation gone. He worked really hard trying to get the membership information back in and everything, but they paid handsomely to get their information back. And it's not necessary to have to do that, because I know Jonas does back up to the cloud. It's just something that everybody has to be aware of and understand. It is crippling The people that I work with in the states that work on computers, there's more of it than you might think. Have Peter, anybody you heard of in Canada having an issue with that?
Open it up to the chat. Anybody show of hands? Anybody have an issue with or clubs they're familiar with? So Gordon, this leads into another good conversation under good governance, and that would be ensuring that not only the directors and officers liability insurance is in place, but also cybercrime and how you can work with your insurer on that. Do you want to spend a minute just from a governance point of view speaking to that?
Sure. You know, insurance is so important, officers and directors insurance, as well as just your regular insurance for your clubs. So important right now. The insurance company did help our local club pay for that ransom. And thank goodness they did. You know, talking about cybercrime, and this is kind of on the edge of cybercrime. I don't know if many of you have these. These are earpod pros. Anybody have these? These are wonderful little, my wife says I use it as a hearing aid, but I generally just don't hear her. So earpods, I have this crazy philosophy that when you come into a boardroom, I worked with a military club once for a week, and every time I would walk into the boardroom, all of the ladies and gentlemen, they had an 8-foot table that was sectioned off into 12 sections, and each person put their keys, telephone, valuables in their little section on that table. And I thought it was fabulous because they weren't playing with their phones during the board meeting. They were focused. And when I say this to a board at a country club, they just think I'm insane. But it helps speed up the meeting because people are focused. So 2 things. I suggest leaving phones on a table outside the board meeting so you can get focus. And I suggest making sure they're off, because these fancy little things are listening devices. So if you have a board member, a manager, an employee who wants to know what's going on in a board meeting, all they have to do is leave their phone in that meeting with their phone on, put their listening device in their ear, and they can hear everything that you talk about. So just one of my little tidbits of help, I hope. So that's one of my pet peeves is telephones in the boardroom. Going on, talking a little bit about governance and the board and the board's role. The board of directors, in my opinion, have 3 jobs, and only 3 jobs. Well, 4. The first job is to hire the general manager. The second job is to be an advisory to the future of the organization, not last month or last year. Third is fiduciary. And I know in the States, it's a little bit different. We have 3 fiduciary responsibilities: the duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. And you have 1 fiduciary responsibility, and that is your club is a baby or a child, and you have to take care of the child. So that's your fiduciary responsibility. The 4th duty of a board member is to have fun, to enjoy themselves. So, and that's it. Board's role is truly limited. The board of directors hires a GM/COO to run the operation without conflict and without micromanagement, which kind of gets me into another area, which is committees. As a GM, a lot of my issues started at the committee level and worked their way up into the board. So committees really need to know what their role is. Committees need a job description, just like board members do. And they need to understand what their governing protocols are. So for committees, I always talk to boards about committees, and I always welcome committee members into the boardroom. A committee's role is to make recommendations to the board about the future of the club. Committees aren't there to spend money. Committees aren't there to manage the management or staff. Committee's role is not to give staff any kind of direction. That's the GM's role and his or her team. So when committees get past their role is when we have conflict and micromanagement. I also recommend each board member and committee member sign a conflict of interest and confidentiality policies. So what does that look like? For me, conflict of interest, confidentiality, excuse me, I'm having trouble with that word today. Confidentiality policy is the duty of loyalty and conflict of interest definitions, just kind of explaining what that is, making sure the board members understand that if they are taking part in something, if they're going to profit from it, they need to excuse themselves from some discussions. And really the big one is confidentiality. One thing we are seeing here in the States, there are over 400 lawsuits right now dealing with confidentiality. So what's happening? You're going through your board meeting, you're talking about membership, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith may be getting a divorce, and you're dealing with the issues with courts on the divorce, and meetings over with, a couple of board members are walking out to their car, they're overheard talking about Mr. and Mrs. Smith getting this divorce that's confidential information. Another member hears about it, or staff member hears about it, and the next thing you know, you're getting sued. So right now there's 410 cases in the United States in confidentiality issues. So that's it's a great importance to discuss with your board their conflict of interest and their confidentiality. And lastly, in governance, I would say a governance audit is a good thing to have. Now, not a lot of people do that, but if you have someone come in, or if you as a GM take a look at your bylaws, make sure they're updated according to your federal and local laws, make sure that they're not outdated, because most bylaws are outdated. I was just working with a club that revised their bylaws a month before, and they were already outdated by the time I got there to talk to the board, because of the way they did things. Some of their processes were already outdated. So make sure you give yourself a good governance audit. There's probably 100 or more questions that you could answer to take a look at. I have a governance audit that you can have. Just shoot me, and I have lots of documentation you can take a look at. Shoot me an email, and it's easy. It's Gordon, Gordon, at apcd.com. I'll send that to you. Looking at the boardroom, too many boards spend time on previous information. So one of the things I do when I talk to boards, I have a board effectiveness quiz. And in that quiz, I ask them, what percentage of the time at each board meeting are you spending time talking about historical reports, financial reports, just any historical data? And probably most clubs spend 30 to 60% of their time on historical data. So I really highly recommend a consent agenda. The consent agenda is putting your minutes, your financials, and membership numbers, not applications, but membership numbers. And I hope, am I still on? I think I am. We just had a lightning strike that I heard my computer flash. So let me start over with that. Too many boards are looking at historical information, wasting your time, wasting their time. They don't need to see it. They really don't need to go over it. So a consent agenda will include the previous minutes, the financials, and membership numbers, not membership applications. What this does is all the information on the consent agenda is historical. Your board members are there to talk about the future, not the past. There's nothing they can do about the numbers that they're talking about. The last club I talked to about the consent agenda, they were looking at numbers from 2 months ago, and they were spending an hour to an hour and a half looking at these numbers and talking about what they can do. And there's nothing they can do about 2-month-old financials. So highly, highly recommend a consent agenda. It will drop off a lot of time in your board meetings. And then also board nominating committees. I recommend not necessarily having a nominating committee because it's just a circle of life in some areas. I want a board member on my board that wants to be on the board for positive reasons, not negative reasons. So I actually have a board application and a board commitment form that people who are interested in running for the board will sign, saying that they're committed to help with oversight in the board meetings. So I also have board self-assessments that I recommend board members filling out every year. This is something that they can keep themselves. And then I have an individual assessment that board members need to fill out. They really need to want to serve for the appropriate reasons, not making changes to staff or structures, but to improve the club, its culture, and the club experience, which is something I want to talk about too. But other areas that I see boards needing education on, and I know it's already 1:30, ethics, sexual harassment, committee roles, and governing protocols. Those are all areas that boards really need to take a look at. And really, when I go into clubs, I talk about board presidents, and there are 2 or 3 types of board presidents. There's either, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but you either have a board president that is in charge and business is taken care of before you get to the meeting. You have a board member that is what I call a kumbaya board member that wants everyone to be heard and to take the time for that so everybody's feelings are in good shape and nobody's hurt and nobody feels misguided, or you just have a board president that doesn't care and is I saw this recently, just kind of a puppet for another person on the board who really wanted to be board president. So make sure you get the right people on your board, make sure they're there for the right reasons, and make sure you know them. So that is my soapbox. Now, Peter, I kind of wanted to talk about why a club is not a restaurant. Do you think that's a good topic?
I think that would be, it's over to you. I think that's a great discussion to kind of share. That was food and beverage. And I think every club across that I've ever visited around the world, food brings us all together. And I think that is something that, from the Gulf to the city to the yacht to the family club, food is always going to be present. So I think that definitely talking about F&B would be terrific, and what you've seen, what you've learned, what you're seeing from a governance point of view. So continue on.
Fantastic. Yes, food and beverage is the centerpiece of really any club. But in the private club industry, every board I've ever worked with has a problem with food and beverage and why food and beverage does not make a profit. Now, I will tell you, as my personal experience, I have made a profit in food and beverage on paper, but my assistant GM, who really ran food and beverage, was in administration, and I didn't charge heat, light, power to food and beverage. So it's really a misnomer. It just depends on how you list your expenses in food and beverage. But what I want to say is the food and beverage department in a club is an amenity. It is not a profit center, and we can agree to disagree. But in my experience, it's very difficult for many outside the club industry to understand how clubs can lose money in food and beverage, and how clubs are really designed to lose food and beverage. As a service amenity, the food and beverage department is designed to add value to the membership. It's ultimately to provide a high value proposition for dues paying members and to get possible members in. Food and beverage is the social hub of the club, and many times food and beverage is a staple for many programs and may be wrapped into the cost of something, or it may be complimentary, such as if you're having a special night for new members. So you're writing off the cost of the food and beverage, or it may just be part of your food and beverage cost as a negative. So many different areas will have food and beverages, and they may charge $25, and the food and beverage is incorporated into that fee. So it's hard to track it. And so why does the food and beverage department lose money? First, expectations are high. Members want food to be on par with local restaurants that they go to. We have a very, very excellent steakhouse nearby, and I can tell you their menu hasn't changed much in the last 5 to 10 years. But the club, the members want a fresh menu for every season. So, expectations are high in both areas, but your costs are minimal in that steakhouse because you're cooking the same thing over and over again. You can hire someone and train them how to cook that steak. But if you have 5 different departments that are having banquets in each department, if you're having something in the tennis or something at the pool or something in every area, you need highly qualified staff to do that. That's going to cost more money. So members want food to be on par with local eateries. They want trendy menus as well as old favorites. They need highly qualified and well-trained staff, and members want handcrafted cocktails, and they want club prices. They want club pours. They don't want to have to wait. You know, you walk into the high-end restaurant and they're like, we're a little backed up. Why don't you have a cocktail in the cocktail lounge? And at that point, that's great, but they're going to spend another $15 to $25 on a cocktail in the cocktail lounge that they didn't plan to. When they come to the club, they expect to get in, and they expect to have their favorite chair, their favorite table on the window, which is one of the reasons I got out of the business, is the holidays and everybody wants to sit next to a window. So again, I can't emphasize enough, members want club prices, club pours, no waiting, fast, consistent service, and members want what they want, when they want it, and where they want it. You know, you can't walk into a restaurant and say, I know it's a steak restaurant, but can I get a 3-egg omelet with ham and cheese and maybe, you know, something else on the side? Well, members want that, and they want it where they want it, even if it's not on the menu. So you have staff that's cooking eggs at dinner, beef Wellington, and all out of the same kitchen. It's a fast, high quality, and affordable experience, regardless of the request. Clubs have limited patrons where restaurants are unlimited. And now with you being locked down, some of you don't have any patrons at all. Many members want to share a plate and not be charged for that extra plate like the restaurant will, or they may want avocado on the side and they don't expect to be billed for that like you would be at a restaurant. And menus are often influenced by committee members, and those committee members don't understand the prices, popularity, portion, and cost of those meals. So the chef and the team need to assure that they have the equipment needed, preparation, products needed, space, and culinary experience that are all considerations for your menus. These are things board members don't understand. These are things like I remember in my clubs always at the master's time, why don't our greens look like this, or why don't our flowers look like this? And gosh, I was over at, you know, the steakhouse the other night, and I can't understand why we don't have this. So they're just two different operations. And these restaurants don't generally have banquet space. So in the club, there's a higher waste and labor because of the talent and expertise needed for the various menus and banquets that are often going on simultaneously. Members also have pricing expectations. Many have paid an initiation fee and ongoing dues and possibly a food minimum, and they expect better prices and better beverage pours. Again, I will say that because it's so true. You have your pour at a restaurant that's 1.25 ounces generally, and at the club it's 1.75, maybe 2 ounces, 2 ounces. And your prices there at the club are usually lower than the restaurant. Club I just worked with, they have their beverage price cost was 40%. And I just said, whoa, there's a problem here. Well, they're selling wine for 10% above their cost, which really escalated their cost of goods because everybody's drinking wine now. So boards have to understand this is a different business. And club events are usually lost leaders subsidized by the club, often covering costs of goods and not labor and other expenses, because those club events are a member value proposition. And finally, keeping turnover low at a club is important to the members. So you have to pay higher guaranteed pay, benefits, and incentives that restaurants don't have to pay, because your members want to see that face over and over and over again. They become families, as you know very, very well. Labor costs are higher due to service expectations in all areas of the club, and the club is always open. You know, it doesn't matter if it's 7 a.m. or 10 or 11 p.m. If there's a member there, they want service because they pay their dues, they pay everything that they pay, and they want to be taken care of. So, get off my soapbox again. In a nutshell, food and beverage department in a club is as much a service amenity as tennis, fitness, golf, or swimming pool. It exists to facilitate a member's overall experience at the club, and it validates their decision to join the club and create memories, ultimately contributing to happy, satisfied members and a very healthy dues line, I hope. So I could keep on going, but I want to allow some time for questions.
So we've got a couple that have come in, and thank you, Gordon. That was excellent. Really great topics. I know there's probably hundreds of questions that come out of it. We will make sure that we share the 100 or more questions for the governance audit, as well as the job descriptions that I'm familiar with through your BoardRoom Institute. They're exceptional, very helpful, as well as the board evaluations, really something that are worth looking at. Trevor Noonan, we're going to turn it over to you. You've got a question regarding your AGM.
Yeah, sure, Gordon. So I'm curious what documents you might recommend sharing to what I would say board nominees. As an example, so we don't have a nominating committee. Our executive selects incoming directors, which are then put in front of our board or our committee of management. So in advance of those names going to the membership, I give those nominees the board policy manual because I want them to understand what they have to do. Are there any other documents you would recommend sharing with board nominees?
Do you generally have more nominees than spaces open?
Never.
Okay, then I would probably go ahead and give them a little historical background. So your policy manual, make sure they understand the bylaws, what their role is. I would go ahead and give them this commitment form that they're going to commit to spending the time and their talents. And if you have a library or any nonprofit or areas of your club, their money. And I would go ahead and let them see some of the financials. I would give them a mini overview of a board orientation, so they understand what they're getting into.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gordon, we have a question that came in via chat, and it's specifically around what you're seeing. Obviously, we're all a quarter or two from coming back. Every club in North America, vaccines are being rolled out. What are you seeing? And we touched on this briefly with Jared at the Summer Club, with the human capital. And I would say at all of our clubs, it's truly the most valuable asset that you spoke to. It's not about how valuable the green is or the clubhouse. All those are replaceable. Staff, on the other hand, is the heart of the operation for so much. So do you want to speak a little bit to that component as far as what flag should a governance and board be worried about today with respect to the human capital of the club world?
People are changing. This pandemic has changed individuals to the point where some are afraid to get out of their homes. Some don't ever want to go back to work in an office or a club environment. So some people that are your long-term employees, they may not be coming back. Right now, in the States, a lot of things have loosened up. We're not required to wear masks outside. in my state, we're not required to wear masks, period, unless the office building has it posted that you're required to. So help is very, very hard to come by because what we call unemployment insurance pays them more than what they can get when they come back to work. But what I would do with the board's knowledge and the costs involved is I would start bringing those people back that you know are integral to your operation, and I would pay them to do whatever it is that needs done. If you need to repaint, if you need to clean, if you need to rework, retrain, because you know, the people that have worked at your club for 20 years know what to do, but it's going to be a little different coming back because your members will come back. And that is the good news. Members are coming back fast. So clubs are seeing a huge uptick in sales. The challenges are human capital and product. So some of the products that you may be getting normally may be out of stock. So, you know, if they're not perishable, I'd look at I'm bumping up a little bit on my on my cost of goods and making sure I have it if it's something that the members expect. So human capital definitely important, and that's going to probably be your toughest area to fulfill.
No, it seems that way. So we've got some time, probably another 5 minutes for questions. Is there anybody else who has any questions from the floor? Just show of hands through emoji, or if you'd like to jump in with Gordon. When you talked about the Summit Club, you sort of spoke to a little bit about the fact that they were struggling even to service their members today, even though they're not able to run functions, events, and large parties, if you will. How do we come out of that? Like, this is something that I think that governance, what do we need to look at now? Is it a significant cost of living increase? Is it something whereby we're proactive getting them back before they're gone? And again, not everybody can work at an Amazon warehouse. You know, there's a lot of people that were just wanting to work that went and got something else. So just touching a little bit deeper into that, who's done it right in clubs that you've seen, Gordon?
I don't think we've gotten that far. Like we were talking about, you may have a fabulous chef or a dessert chef, pastry chef that everybody loves their product, but that pastry chef doesn't want to come back to work. They want to work out of their home. So you may have to look at them as a contract employee maybe, and have them make whatever it is at their home and deliver it. They're going to be a lot of issues and a lot of challenges that the board will need. Honestly, the board needs to be aware, but it's the GM's responsibility to provide the staff. It's the board's responsibility to provide the income through dues to make sure you can afford your staff. So, and every club is different. You know, as a young GM, I thought our prices were a little high. And I always made money in banquets and I lost money in grill service. But then you can go to another club that they wanted really, really low prices. So their dues line was high. They may run a 55 or 60% food cost, but they're making it up somewhere else. This is a very profitable club. So it just depends on what your club does, what your club wants, and what they're willing to pay, honestly. So we have clubs that are just average, you know, charge the same average restaurant prices. I have clubs that will charge $12 for a 10-ounce steak, but they're paying $1,200 a month for dues. or even more. So a lot of clubs are going to, what I've seen is they will plan their year and they'll price everything out. And some of these things they're including in their dues. They're raising their dues, but it's because they need to have, and this is for everybody across the board, you have to have a member experience. It can't just be walking into the building and a guard or someone, a coat check saying hi. There has to be an experience, whether it's a lighting experience, whether it's, there's a million things you can do. But it's going to be all about the experience.
Good stuff. Dean Davidson, you've got a question about the board, and then we're going to hear from Adam.
Yes, Gordon, thanks for the presentation. Good stuff. What do you have any suggestions on how to get members to join the board?
That is a difficult proposition. I do have a lot of clubs that can't get people to join the board. Well, on your behalf and in your benefit, I would recommend making the board smaller. I was just talking to a club in North Dakota. They had 5 board members and they were considering adding board members. And I said, are you going through, some major renovation, or are you going through something big? Are you going to host a PGA tournament, or what is it? Why do you want to add people? Because I always recommend lower numbers than higher numbers. And I've worked with boards that are 40, 45 down to 5. So in order to get these people actively participating and interested in the board, I would maybe hold quarterly meetings and just see if anybody's interested in knowing what's going on with a club. Or, the easiest thing would be if you have committees to look at your committee members and to talk to them individually, maybe invite them to lunch and just talk about them moving on up off the committee onto the board.
Stuff. Adam Zubek, if you could unmute your mic, you're up next. Good segue.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Peter and Gordon, for putting on this session. It's been absolutely fabulous, and it's great to see so many familiar faces across the country. My question, Gordon, was more around how often are boards meeting today? So during the pandemic, there was no question in my mind that we needed to increase the frequency that the board was meeting, just given the risk around activities that were occurring and how quickly things were changing. But on a go-forward basis, what are you seeing in terms of trends for directors' meetings, and what's the frequency?
I believe as we come out of the pandemic, my recommendation is to continue with a monthly meeting for 6 to 8 months, because the information is very, very important. But then honestly, I think people are so overwrought with work and all the changes that they've experienced that I would almost recommend every other month. I work with clubs that meet 4 times a year. I meet with clubs that meet every month. So I think you're going to see, I really believe you're going to see maybe meetings every month. Some of them will be Zoom meetings, and some I would recommend maybe every other month meeting in person. But I do believe you're going to have board members who don't want to come to the club for a board meeting, and they're going to request being on a Zoom call. So getting more money into your technology is going to be important. And also, I think my last article in BoardRoom Magazine had some tips about maintaining functional board notebooks. I think a lot of that's going to be technology now. I've always been kind of a proponent of board portals where people can look back into the computer portal and see past minutes or past financials, or even vote virtually. I think you'll see more of that as well.
Good stuff. Thanks, Adam. Great question. Gordon, we're going to wrap it up because I'm very sensitive of everybody's time. We really, my job is to thank everybody for coming today. You know, one of the things through the City Club Summit that we've done is we've had some really valuable dialogues, and this is another one. And we're grateful for you and really all the participants for making the time, from the GMs on the call and the senior managers within their operations, as well as the board members, because this is something that we've not really engaged the board members the way that we'd like. So appreciate all of not only the board members from Terminal City Club that attended, but the other clubs that are on today. We've got a couple calls that we're going to be sharing more for additional calls that we've got coming up. One will be specifically to the GMs in the crowd. John Furlong is going to have a talk where he will be speaking specifically to our staffs. And if anybody knows John, knows not only did he lead the Winter Games in Vancouver, but he is one heck of a general manager, having worked in the industry for a long time. And he's agreed to come and speak to our employees with all our clubs, and we can share that link publicly with them. So we'll share details on that shortly. But I'm going to turn it over to Joanna Hayes, who I know is very familiar with your BoardRoom Institute software. We will email some documents from Gordon as discussed in this call. But Joanna is going to formally thank you, and you're ultimately going to be given the last word to wrap it up. So Joanna, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Peter. You know, Peter had actually spoken very, very highly of the Board Institute back at the CSCM conference in, I guess, September. So I started working with Gordon and the Board Institute in October, just shortly after we onboarded or we announced our new board members. So, you know, the materials that we've been able to identify through the governance audit have been invaluable in onboarding these new board members in. You know, the interactive materials have been amazing for them to watch and actually, you know, go through. So I can't say enough of how valuable the materials that are, like I said, both interactive and in the toolbox that are provided through the Board Institute program. You know, we have greatly benefited from these methods. So on behalf of the CCS, thank you, Gordon, for enlightening us with your professional and personal experience on governance and making this presentation memorable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna. I really appreciate it. It's my honor to serve, and this is what my passion is, because I know I can help in many, many different ways. And if anybody is interested in seeing more, just shoot me an email. I'll get you signed up for a week so you can take a look at it at your own time. And I'm here to help. So use me.
Great stuff, Gordon. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining on, Gordon. We will forward these details out with your contact information, and I hope everybody enjoys the afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Peter, for
Joanna.
organizing this. Great job.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.